History is often a game of millimeters, but there are moments when it becomes a fever dream of kilotons. In the late 1930s, the industrial titans at Krupp were issued a challenge that ignored the laws of practicality. How do we erase the most formidable fortifications on the planet without ever setting foot inside them? The answer wasn't a tactical breakthrough or a faster tank. It was a machine that looked like it had been hammered together by gods who had abandoned reason. Meet Schwere Gustav and Dora. These were not merely cannons. They were 1,350-ton steel leviathans, monsters of iron that didn't just fire shells. They shifted the very geography of the battlefield. But behind the terrifying roar and the plumes of black smoke lay a cold, industrial irony. These were the most expensive, most logistically fragile, and most absurdly inefficient weapons ever forged by human hands. This is the story of the giants that were too massive to survive the very world they were built to conquer. To understand the Gustav, you have to abandon common sense and look at the raw, brutal statistics. This weapon was a singular solution to a singular problem: the Maginot Line. The French fortifications were masterpieces of reinforced concrete, buried deep within the earth, designed to shrug off any artillery piece ever conceived. To crack that shell, Krupp realized they didn't need a bigger gun. They needed a physical anomaly. The result was a machine that defied the limits of metallurgy. It boasted a caliber of 800 millimeters, a barrel so wide a grown man could stand upright inside it. It weighed 1,350 tons, more than a dozen heavy tanks combined. The barrel alone stretched 32.5 meters, a length of steel so heavy it required specialized internal cooling and reinforcement just to prevent it from sagging under its own weight. This wasn't a weapon you deployed. You didn't just hitch it to a truck and drive. The Gustav required 2 sets of parallel railway tracks just to support its monstrous footprint. It moved like a steel centipede, a literal iron fortress on wheels that dominated the horizon. But the sheer physics of the machine was its first great enemy. If the ground beneath those tracks wasn't perfectly reinforced with concrete and timber, the Gustav wouldn't fire. It would simply sink into the earth, swallowed by its own weight. Forging the gun was a miracle of engineering. Operating it was a logistical nightmare that bordered on insanity. To move, assemble, and fire a single shot from Gustav, you didn't hire a crew. You mobilized an entire army. A dedicated commander with the rank of Major General led a force of over 4,000 men dedicated to this single weapon. 500 specialists were required just for the firing sequence. Men whose only job was to calculate the wind, the curvature of the earth, and the temperature of the propellant. 2 full battalions of anti-aircraft troops were permanently tethered to the gun, tasked with shielding the beast from the only thing it feared: the sky. Engineering units had to work weeks in advance, carving a specialized firing curve into the earth, because the Gustav was too large to traverse its barrel. To aim left or right, the entire 1,350-ton machine had to be physically rolled along a curved track. The assembly process alone took 3 days of constant labor using massive steam cranes. Every shell it fired was the size of a small car, weighing up to 7,100 kilograms. This wasn't warfare. It was a slow industrial ritual. The machine consumed oceans of oil, thousands of man-hours, and millions of marks, all for a weapon that was functionally blind and completely immobile. For all its absurdity, the Gustav had its one moment of apocalyptic glory. June 1942. The siege of Sevastopol. For 5 weeks, the steel god finally spoke. It fired 48 rounds at the Soviet forts, and the results were nothing short of biblical. The sound of the Gustav firing was described by survivors as a physical blow to the chest, a roar that could burst eardrums and shatter windows miles away. One specific shot entered the history books of horror. It struck an ammunition magazine hidden 30 meters beneath the sea floor, protected by layers of solid limestone rock. The Gustav's shell didn't just hit the fort. It punched through the crust of the earth like it was wet cardboard. When it detonated, it obliterated the White Cliff Fort in a single earth-shaking eruption that sent a shock-wave across the Black Sea. Mechanically, it was a triumph. The 800-millimeter shells were performing exactly as Krupp had promised. But Sevastopol would be the beginning and the end. After those 48 shots, the barrel was so worn from the friction of the massive shells that it had to be sent back to the factory. The giant had exhausted itself in its own violence. As the war turned into a game of speed and air power, the Gustav became a dinosaur staring at a meteor. In a world of fast-moving armored divisions and long-range heavy bombers, the super gun was a liability. It was too slow to hide, too expensive to lose, and far too difficult to relocate. By 1944, the sky belonged to the Allies. A single scout plane could spot the massive double railway tracks from miles away, making the Gustav a sitting duck for any fighter bomber with a 500-pound bomb. The machine was a prisoner of its own logistics. It couldn't retreat, it couldn't maneuver, and the massive supply chain it required was being systematically shredded by Allied air raids. In the end, the Gustav and its sister gun, Dora, never saw another battle. They were eventually blown up by their own crews in 1945, reduced to twisted piles of scrap metal of the gods to prevent them from being captured. They were the ultimate evidence that in the world of engineering, bigger is rarely better. They represented a philosophy that believed raw, mechanical mass could overcome the complexities of modern, fluid combat. Today, the giants are gone. No Gustav survived the scrap heaps of the post-war era. Only a few massive 800-millimeter shells remain in museums, standing like silent, polished monuments to a time when industrial power was used to chase a dream of total destruction. The story of Dora and Gustav is a warning for every engineer and every strategist. It reminds us that when we become obsessed with the big machine, we often lose sight of the smart strategy. Was it a masterpiece of human ingenuity, or merely a monument to a collective ego? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you want to keep exploring the rusted, gritty secrets of history, hit the subscribe button and join us for the next descent.